Hello, and welcome to today's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy, the completely inept and useless, basically. So the stream was supposed to start 2 hours ago. My brain went, right, that's 6 a.m. here in Tokyo. That means I should set my alarm to wake up at not 6 a.m., which is exactly what I did. So I apologize to everybody who was getting ready for the show 2 hours ago. If it was makes any consolation, I was sleeping soundly and peacefully and happily, contemplating the stream that is now taking place. I also want to formally, officially, and totally apologize to the Web Goblin for having kept him up late. He sent me messages. He's like, are you alive? Have you been eaten by an earthquake? Have you become Godzilla? And are you roaming around Shinjuku eating everyone? Did you find bacon? All of those questions went through his mind as I was in slumbering land. Anyway, it's as Marco Bakker there says, it's okay, sleep is important. Yes, it is. It absolutely is. The reason for that is because last night I was finishing the book. Now, this is that fabled book that I've been talking about. I'm not going to talk too much about it here now because we're not here for that. But it's ready to go to the printers. That's how excited I am, and obviously that was just going through my head. Anyway, guys, Godzilla confirmed Alexei Volkov. Yes, sir. Anyway, got the right shape for it, I suppose, depending on which Godzilla you go with. Anyway, so today we are here to talk about going back to basics. Now, why did we want to do this video? Why did we say, okay, hang on, let's just go back to basics. Let's go back. Let's have a look and see what's going on as a game master, as a dungeon master. And the reasoning is sometimes we forget the simple things in life and where to start. Now, the Save or Dice campaign that I've been running online, I don't know if any of you have been watching that. If you have, give us a shout out in the chat there. But if you have been watching that, it's a very simple narrative that I've had to go through because I'm trying to keep it to the 2-hour format. And it's made me reflect and think, well, perhaps sometimes we just need to get back to basics. So today, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about how to design an adventure, how to go back to the very beginning, and that's what we're going to be looking at. There's the concept, the development, the stats, and the life. Now, if you have questions, so there's a little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, you need to write in a big box first, question, and then your actual question, and try and save them for the end, because I am trying to keep an eye on things. The Web Goblin was supposed to be here so that he could help manage that, but it's now midnight in South Africa, and he's definitely asleep, probably rather angry at me, actually. So I think we need to maybe raise the roof a little bit and see if we can buy him some cake or something to apologize. Anyway, so if you have a question, plop it in and just write question up front and then put your question thereafter, and I will try and catch it on the stream. That's why I'm looking over there at my screen there. There's something basic DM trickery. Absolutely, that's what we're going to have a look at. You missed last night's episode. Well, Kyle Graham, you've got something to look forward to. The guys had a lot of fun, I think. Certainly seemed to have got there. Yeah, Cassandra Judd, I think you should watch it. Well, that's if you like watching other people roleplay, of course. It's very, very different. D&D and cake. Yes, I like cake. Super Chat is enabled, so if you want to buy the Web Goblin some cake, well, share the love. You know what to do with Super Chat. Just give generously so we can buy the Web Goblin a gigantic cake, of which I will cut out just a small section for the Game Master, and then the Web Goblin will get the rest. I do promise that. Anyway, enough of that nonsense now. Let's get on with the actual show, please, he said. Now, let's just make sure that I do this correctly. Okay, so I've got to do that, I think right. Okay, so back to basics. So how do we get this? Oh, wrong thing. Right, sorry, I'm doing something differently here. There we go. So there we go. Right. Concept. Okay. Oh, look at that, Kyle Graham. Thank you very much. The Web Goblin will absolutely get that cake. I promise you, it will definitely get bought here in Tokyo, and most certainly, once I've made sure that it's good quality cake, I will ship it back down to South Africa, and he'll get it absolutely in a couple weeks' time. But, well, you never know. There's World Anvil, World Building. Good morning. Good evening for World Anvil. I think, I don't know, it's just chaos. It's crazy. Anyway, okay, so concept. Now, what I try and do when I sit back and I look at how to create a dungeon, if I've never done it before, if you're a new GM, are there any new GMs? Let's have a look down there. Let us know what's going going on. R. Highland, I thank you. The cake is not a lie. I actually had a t-shirt that had that on it because of that. Look at that. Well, he needs it before he goes. Absolutely, says Jason Camera. Thank you for that. So if you're a new GM, raise your symbol, I suppose. I'm new, says Yuko MJ. Fantastic. Okay, good. So there are a couple of you out there. So where do you start when you're designing an adventure? And if you're a seasoned DM or a seasoned GM, where do you start? Now, obviously, you know my method, the sentence. Someone wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. But sometimes that's just, well, I don't want to say that that's too difficult to do, but that generally leads to bigger things. How do you do I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to run off the fly. How do you do it? So I go with these things. This is a fun exercise now, especially if you are more experienced with running campaigns, because this is going to stretch you. But if you haven't done it before, if you haven't run adventures before, this is a really fun thing to do. 3 things. What are those things? Literally, they could be anything. So let's say, for example, let's say the 3 things are tentacles, because I'm in Japan and I happen to look over at a statue of Cthulhu. Tentacles, a castle model. See the little castle? There we go. That's a little castle there. A castle model, and I'm literally just doing this on the fly. And a silver tankard full of coffee. That's a good idea. All right, so we've got tentacles, a castle, and a silver tankard full of coffee. Those are our 3 things. Simple as that. Why are there always tentacles, says Laura Bones 79. I agree, Laura. Why are there always tentacles? Absolutely. So, I want that model. Yeah, well, this is actually, I'm going to segue here. This is the problem of live chat, is you can distract me and I can get really distracted really easy. This is a little model that I actually made. This is 3D printed of a castle, which I will be releasing, by the way, the blueprints of as we get there. I then just painted it up, not very well, and the lighting's not doing it. Anyway, it's just a little castle. It's called Tungay Keep. You'll hear about it on the channel later on. It is incoming, don't worry. Nonetheless, so tentacles, castle, tankard. That's it. So that's what's on my desk at the moment in the YouTube studio here. Those are the 3 things. 3 NPCs. All right, so let's think. 3 NPCs. You guys can give me... The villain wants coffee. Yes, absolutely. Coffee is definitely what we need. All right, so there are 3 things that we need. 3 NPCs that we need. So let's say, for example, we've got Azriel. No, that's a demon's name, isn't it? That's not unique. I'm going to choose names from the chat here, as a matter of fact. We've got Marco, but we're going to change that. We're going to make it more of a NPC-esque name, and I'm going to write this down so that I don't do what I normally do, which is forget the names that I come up with. So Marco becomes Merku. Marco becomes Merku. All I'm doing is I'm using my technique for creating names, which you just change around the vials. We've got Cassandra there, I see. Cassandra becomes Cassandra becomes Kusindru, and then we've got Renato becomes let's say Ranuti, Kusindru, and Merku. No, the Merku and the Kusindru, it sounds too similar, so Merku becomes I don't want to say murky. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Mercool. I'm going to add an L on the end. There we go. Absolutely. Belsa Central, welcome. I'm glad you've caught the live stream for various reasons. All right, so we've got our 3 names: Mercool, Kusindra, and Ranuti. Those are 3 names. Those are literally, that's all we have. We don't know anything else about them. 3 locations. Now, you might say the castle is a location. No, well, that is it's a thing. It's a thing. So the thing is already decided upon. Okay, we have 180 people watching. Hello, all 180 people. I welcome you to this wonderful live stream. We're trying to raise money to pay for cake for the web goblin whom I kept up late and then sent to bed without his supper. So bear that in mind anyway. All right, so 3 locations. So the 3 locations we're going to say is, and these are just generic. So I'm going to say swamp. I'm going to say mountain. And I'm going to say, let's say, tower. All right, 3 locations. There we go. So we've got 3 locations, 3 NPCs, and 3 things. Now, what do we do with those? Well, now we link them one-to-one. That's all we do. So we haven't done anything. The location is the swamp the castle was built on. Said it was foolish to build a castle in a swamp. Oh, I know where you're going with that, and that just makes me want to sing and sing. No, don't do any singing. All right, so I'm watching the chat as it goes along. If we all fight, we could use 1d100 for initiative. There we go. All right, so we've got these 3 things. Now, we link them together. So, Merkul, we are going to link to the swamp. Kusindru, we're going to link to the mountain, and Ranuti, we're going to link to the tower. Now, we also had tentacles. Tentacles immediately imply swamp, don't they? Absolutely they do. So we're going to put that in there. Tentacles into the swamp. Into the mountain, we are going to put the castle, because reasons. And then the tin cup with coffee in it. Oh, that's a good idea. Into the tower, we're going to put a silver tankard. I like that idea. Well, anyway, I like the idea of coffee. Now, slimy swamptopuses. I'm not going to go there. So that's what we have. We have these different locations. Now, someone wants ellipses. All right, my editor would be screaming at me right now. Hello, Janet, wherever you are. So someone wants something bad and is having difficulty getting it. We all know this sentence, absolutely, and was bound to sneak in at some point. So how do we link tentacles in a swamp to a castle in the mountains and a tower that contains a silver tankard? And how do we link it to someone who wants something? What does Merkul, who lives in the swamp with tentacles, want? What does Kusindru, who lives in the castle mountain, want? And what does Ranuti in the tower with the silver tankard want? Well, we've got to figure those out. And how do we figure what those things are? Well, we go to a starter. We have to start somewhere. Now, the Mage Tower could be cool to go with, especially with the Halloween theme, says Ian McEchen. I agree with you. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Tentacles have some connection. Yes, we've got to link all of these things together. We came up with them, so we might as well use them. Now, what I like to do is I basically fall back onto our acts. We've got Act 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to say, right, well, Act 1 is the tower with the silver tankard. I'm just randomly choosing. Act 2 is the castle mountain. And Act 3 is the tentacle swamp. So how do we link these towers, castles, and tentacle swamps together? As far as I can see it, if we start in the tower where we find a silver tankard, the silver tankard is perhaps, so we find a silver tankard. Oh, that's a good idea. We find a silver tankard where it links us to a lost mountain, a forgotten mountain castle that we don't or didn't know about. That mountain castle is under siege by a creature that lives in the swamp. So there we go. So that's as simple as it is. So we've linked the tower to the castle to the swamp and the people that we've attached to those things to one another. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but to me, that's a very simple way of creating an adventure. It's a very simple and easy way of coming up with an adventure. So now all that we need to do, we've now got these in our acts. So Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Now we need to move forward. And to do that, we need to pick a story. Okay, so this lost castle in the mountain, that's where the tower leads us to. So what is this castle in the mountain, and why do the tentacles want it? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it makes sense that Merkul, the tentacled swamp demon, wants to take the castle back because of an infringement. Or, actually, you know what? It's Halloween, so let's make it a little more romantic than that. Let's say that Merkul, the swamp tentacled being, who has a penchant for bacon, Wow, look at that, Brothger Legion. Thank you very much for that. Cake has been a very long time fan. Thank you. Well, I've helped you with many games. Well, you can see in the super chat what he's saying, I think, or she's saying. I don't know. Anyway, Brothger, thank you so very much for that. The Web Goblin will have lots of cake. Yes, lots of cake. Definitely sent to the Web Goblin. All right, so back to the thought. Merkul, who is in the swamp tentacle demon thing, is in love with Kusindru, who is in the mountain castle. But Kusindru, who is in the mountain castle, is not in... No, I don't want to say she's not in love with him. That's boring. No, rather let's say that her father, let's go with the traditional story, her father does not want her to associate with the tentacle swamp demon. This is a lovely little romance story for Halloween. Why not, after all? So... Kusindru is in love with Merkul, the tentacle demon, and the father does not want to allow her to go into the swamp to go and pick flowers and go on romantic walks and look at wonderful sunsets and do nothing else with the weird tentacle monster. Oh dear, I've been in Japan for too long. Anyway, so this is our story. Now, we've got to pick some fun. What is the fun? Well, as far as I can see it, the fun side of things is that the tower with the silver tankard is going to lead us on this journey towards the castle, which is absolutely fine. We get to the castle, there needs to be a setup. So there needs to be an attack on the party before we get there, just to establish things. Swamp Demon is going to send people to the castle because he thinks that the Lord, the Father, has hired these mercenaries to come and attack him in his swamp. So he attacks them first. So there's a nice little swamp attack. We need to start establishing that there's tentacles around. So we're going to just add in these tentacle creatures. I'm not sure in the DMG actually what creatures have tentacles in a swamp. I seem to recall there was like a tentacle fisher thing. If anyone remembers, just drop it into the chat there. I see Lord Chard Lionheart. So the father is a mad mage in a tower who spells through a cup of coffee. Interesting idea. If you think of the name of that monster, it's a tentacled thing that hides in the water and it can drag people down, I think. Beholderkin, we could go with that as well. Anyway, they're going to have an encounter, then they get to the castle. They discover in the castle that the father is furious that his daughter wants to cavort with these creatures in the swamp, and so he hires the PCs to go and destroy the creatures in the swamp. The actual reason that Merkul was so worried about them arriving in the first place is the reason why they hired. That's a wonderful piece of irony. So the adventurers will now go into the swamp, they will attack Merkul, and they'll go from there. Again, though, we go back to the Silver Tower and we go to the Silver Tankard. I feel that the Silver Tankard needs to have more of an impact, and that's where we pick for cool. That's where we add in a coolness factor to our narrative, and we say, okay, well, how do we work that? How do we bring that in? And perhaps the tankard has the ability to cure Merkul of his tentacleness, although I feel that we should celebrate difference rather than try and cure it and make him back into the handsome prince. I think it should, well, perhaps it's a tankard of everlasting joy or everlasting water, or you can figure that out. Now, a lot of times new GMs then go, well, how do I stat this? So that's why this is actually called statistics. There's too many I's in that sentence there. I know that for certain. Well, there we go. That's why I have so many editors working on my book. But how do we do it? So the statistics we pick for the story. What is the level of the party? If they're level 1s, those tentacle beasts, they're not going to be beholderkin. They're going to be really small little things. A tentacle horror, I think, might be the thing. Tankard of bacon is definitely a good idea. So they're going to stat accordingly, and you can go by CR ratings if you really like, and I can go into depth with CR ratings if you really, really like. I personally don't like them. I don't think that they really help very much, given the way that they play out. I know I don't play monsters correctly because I play them for story. I pick the statistics for story, and I pick them for fun. Now, a throwback, and this is something that I use from 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Now, if you've ever played 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, dear Lord, Yarox Nova, For the cake god, absolutely, $100. Look at that. Thank you very much, Yarox Nova. That is impressive. Thank you. The web goblin is going to have cake for days. What a pity he's not going to make it back to him in South Africa. Anyway, the idea is that when you're trying to stat out monsters, stat it for the story. So we've got this lovely romantic story happening. We've got Kusindru, who's in love with Merkul, who's obviously back in love with her. We've got this evil baron here that is just trying to prevent anything from happening. The father. There's a lot of fun options here that you can add in. Now, obviously, and I say obviously, and I realize that it actually isn't obvious, but what most likely needs to happen is the party, before they leave to go and fight Merkul, because the father will say, I will give you 100 gold if you bring me back the head of that tentacled monster. Before they go, Kusindru needs to get them an aside, needs to get them and say, please, 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 my father is an evil man. We need to make sure that the PCs believe that. Now, it also depends on your PC, so you have to read your players, and if you haven't played with these people before, you have to rely on them being decent human beings. And to do that, the easiest thing, the best thing to do would be to take them into the dungeon, to show, Kusindru takes them down into a dungeon and shows them prisoners who are trapped or being tortured by the evil baron, or however you want to do it, to try and motivate that the tentacle creature is actually right. Another way that you can do it, and this is picking for coolness, is if they go into the swamp, when last did you use dinosaurs? Well, I haven't used dinosaurs for quite some time because I don't like the way they've been statted in the Monsters Manual of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. They might be statted somewhere else. And I realise I've completely forgotten the 4th edition story, which I will come back to, I promise. I am rambling a little bit. I'm sorry about that. I will refocus. I need more coffee, I think. So dinosaurs haven't been statted out, but you can change those stats. You can make them stronger, you can make them weaker, add in little velociraptors that sort of slither through the reeds in the swamp. Make it cool, make it fun. But, and here's my point I'm now getting back to. Coachman, thank you very much running your first campaign. I hope that best of luck with that. I really hope that you're enjoying it and will continue to do it. But the 4th edition rule set, what it did was it introduced a sort of a tiering system for monsters, which I thought was really useful. And I've brought that over into 5th edition. I've actually brought it into every system I run, whether it's Dungeons & Dragons or Starfinder or Pathfinder, it doesn't really matter. I've brought it over. And that is what they call the minion system. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the minion system. But what the minion system is basically, it is monsters. It's bad guys who have 1 hit point. The moment the player character hits that object, it dies. There's no, it's got 8 hit points and the character does 4 hit points. So the battle continues to rage on and on and on and on. It's none of that. Remember, it's for fun here. It's for coolness factor if I get out of the way and eat less cake, which is definitely not going to be happening after today's episode, I can assure you. So play the minion. 1 hit point. The moment they get hit, minions is the one aspect about 4th edition I really like. Alex Berman says, absolutely. So I really like that. So you can add in minions. These are 1 hit point creatures. You smack them, they go down. So imagine if you've got these little velociraptors, or Compsognathus, for example, that wonderful little green dinosaur from one of the Jurassic Park movies. Anyway, Compsognathus was this wonderful little thing that ran around and hunted in packs. If they've only got 1 hit point, that makes for a really cool encounter. Your adventurers are going through the swamps, they're being attacked by these little creatures, and they've got to sort of smack it away, and they hit them and they fall over and they die. It's just about the fun factor, the terror factor. But now we want to get Merkul onto their side. We want to get them onto Merkul's side as well. So if showing them the dungeon, the torture room of the Duke isn't enough to convince them that they should Sindru and Merkul come together, we can then have them being attacked by giant dinosaurs, bigger dinosaurs. And Merkul comes in with his tentacles and he helps save them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What it then dictates is that we have to then go back to the castle. We have to go back to the castle and we now have to defeat the Baron. We have to defeat the Duke. When they get back to the castle, of course, the Duke will be standing there. He should be standing there with young Kusindru tied to a stake. And he's going to sacrifice her to a dark god so that she can't get married to Merkul, she can't fall in love with the man that she loves, or let's say tentacles that she loves. But also the Dark God will smite the swamp and drain it completely. So that's what the Mad Baron sort of idea is. You see how this is just evolving, it's just growing. He's going to have statistics, and he needs to be the most difficult of them all to defeat. Now, preferably, Merkul should be involved in this. There should be some tentacle creatures fighting with this, as well as the heroes who are fighting with this, to overcome this Mad Baron and to prove him wrong. And that leads us to this sentence, which I probably should have been on for a long time now. It says their life. Now, this is about bringing your campaign to life. And I am going to wrap up in 2 minutes flat, so we have time for questions and things. So, bringing your campaign to life, bringing it to life. I've already been doing that by fleshing it out with different kinds of monsters, by bringing in different things. Merkul sounds like Mr. Cool. Well, there you go. Maybe he's a tentacle dude, a druid. Well, who knows? That's entirely up to you to design this. So we talk about sameness. We talk about things that are the same for us as they would be in that space. So how would a distraught Kusindru, who's desperately in love with this individual that she wants to be with forever, how would she treat her father? She'd be dismissive of him. She'd be the typical sort of angry teenager. The father could be this typical domineering father who screams and shouts at her and tells the PCs, oh, what do you do with children apart from torture them and sacrifice them to dark gods? Ha ha. By bringing in the sameness, it might feel as if you're kind of bringing in normalcy. But we need reference points, and we need common reference points, so that makes absolute sense. But then we need to bring in that difference factor. Tentacle druid boy is a different factor. It's about this wonderful romance, and you can end off the entire adventure once the Duke has been defeated with the tentacle boy's tentacles wrapping around Kusindru, and they go in for an embrace, and the tentacles all sort of closing around them in this very, very Disney kind of conclusion, and the PCs will be saying, oh, that's so sweet. Possibly, or they'll be counting out the money that Kusindru will give them, because you do have to reward them. And then this word, funness, which doesn't actually exist. Funness is the idea about how do you make it fun? How do you make it work? How do you make it actually do something for people that's just fun? I think dinosaurs in the swamp with tentacles, and yeah, very Japanese kind of conclusion there, Dylan. I agree with you. That's for me the process. So I know it's taken me half an hour, but I've been explaining things and doing all sorts of things and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, that's how I think of an adventure. I think of those three things. I'm just going to go through it very quickly. Those three things, the three NPCs and the three locations, and you just link them together. We didn't really do too much in that silver tankard. This silver tankard over here, which has got, oh, that's a good idea. We didn't do too much on that, but the idea is it led us from there. So the PCs are going to start in this tower, and then they're going to go from there. It's a nice starting point. You can put a tower anywhere you like in your campaign. It does not matter. They can come across a tower and boom, it leads them into the mountains. Because if the tankard, which is made out of silver, is worth a lot of money, and it talks about it's a map that leads to the hidden castle of this Duke, off you go. Now all you need to do is flesh out a little bit more detailing, and you're A4 away. So we go back to that original sentence. Someone wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. What is that? The Duke wants to keep his daughter away from the tentacled monster in the swamp. And he's having difficulty doing that because she's madly in love with him. Or we could rewrite it and say that Kusindru is madly in love with Merkul and wants to spend the rest of her life with him, but her father is preventing her from leaving the castle and being with her true love. Either way, it's a wonderful little Halloween-esque horror sort of adventure. I can see Tim Burton making a movie out of that, as a matter of fact. Quite possibly. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on how one goes back to basics and uses the game to support your story, uses stats to support your story. Now, we move over to the question phase. If there are any questions, there are now 206 people watching. So if there are questions, now's the time to ask them. I am here until the end of the hour. So let's get those questions coming through. I see I'm going to look at the chat here. The daughter should be a low-level wizard. Ian says her love for tentacles. She's an MP warlock. Says Alex, that's not a bad idea. Tranquil, hey Guy, how are you doing? Well, how are you doing, Tranquil, I should say. Thank you for joining our stream now. What's your ideal set? Remember, you got to put the word question in the front, preferably in caps locks, because it's very far away. My idea would be that the daughter contacts the PCs telepathically, pleading them to rescue her boyfriend from the mercenaries her father sent out, says Big Slam 1993. That's not a bad idea at all. As they get closer, perhaps the silver tankard is something that she's thrown there so she can attune with it, so she can talk to anyone who's holding it, absolutely. Hot Weir says, I seek your advice on how to deal with party disputes. It's a very frustrating situation I had with my party. Also, RPG Table Finder is still a good place to find parties. Yeah, I believe it is. There's like 6,500 people out there looking for tables and things, so I think you can go and have a look at that. Party disputes, that's a totally different video, absolutely. How do you handle party resolution? I have done some videos on those, so go and have a look for those. So there's a question. Alexei says, so what happens if your players are evil? Yeah, what happens if they go out into the swamp and they slay poor old Merkul and bring back his tentacled head and give it to the Duke? It's a very good question. What happens when your players run in the exact opposite direction to the direction you want them to go to? So you've had Kusindru show them the torture room where he's torturing poor old peasants, and then, of course, they go out into the swamp, they kill Merkul, they bring back his head, they plop it down on the Duke's table. Well, now what happens is we fall back, I think anyway, on our knowledge of the typical playout of films, of books, of novels, of plays of this kind. My immediate instinct is that Kusindru now turns into this giant evil force. So she goes into her room, she's upset, she's frustrated, she drinks this potion, which she has, she's already prepared it. This is Romeo and Juliet style now coming into play, so thank you, Will Shakespeare, for this idea. She goes in there, she drinks this potion, and she turns into a giant tentacled monster. She was going to do this all along so that she and her lover could be in the same sort of tentacular space. She drinks that, she becomes this giant monster, and then she attacks the party. She kills the party kills her. The adventure is now effectively over. Whether, of course, the party survives or not, that's entirely up to you. But if they defeat her, they defeat her. And that's your grand finale. So instead of fighting the Duke, they now fight Kusindru. So it's a very simple little swap around. It's a very simple reversal. But more importantly, what I try and do is I try and make sure to link the actions in a way that makes sense. So that's certainly something that I try to do. I hope that answers your question. Now, I saw some more questions coming through here. Can I scroll up? Question says, Tranquil, have you ever created your monster? And how would one go about doing that? Okay, so that's a very good question. Now, all of my players know, anyone who's ever played with me at the table, as a matter of fact, I have the monsters manual. I'm busy looking for it right now. It's over there, too far away for me to get. I take the monsters manual and I look at the monsters stats. So I might say, okay, I need a little level 1, CR1 as the book calls it. I need a CR1 character. Okay, great. There's a CR1 character. Fantastic. I need this character. I'm going to use this, whatever it is, a lizard folk, but I want them to have tentacles rather than spears and clubs. I'll just change it to tentacles. There's nothing, in my opinion, wrong with changing the visual descriptor. Unless, of course, suddenly you say it stabs you with its tentacle as a sharpened point, because the book says spears. You've got to change that up as well. So where it says spear, you say tentacle. Stab, you suddenly get slapped. Although a pointed tentacle or a barbed tentacle might work as well. So there's a little bit of reskinning that needs to go on. But in terms of actually creating a monster from the ground up, I do that as well, but I don't go into nearly as much detail. I kind of go, well, if the party, and this is in Dungeons & Dragons terms, if the party is level 5, generally speaking, a monster that will challenge that party probably has +5 to whatever it is, to pretty much everything. So if it's a tentacle beast, let's make up a tentacle beast on the fly. If it's a tentacle beast, it probably has +5 to its attack. Its attack, let's say, does 1d8 +5, because that's a lot of damage from all of its sort of tentacles slapping around and those kinds of things. Its saving throws are not going to be nearly that high, because I want the players to succeed. If we go back to that stats rule, if I can go back here, if we go back to that stats rule, you're picking for fun and you're picking for coolness. So the tentacle creature maybe has got I don't know, +1 to its con save, and the rest are negligible. We don't really care about them. We'll just do as needed. So that's pretty much it when I go into creating a monster. I don't go into too much depth. I use it just for the story. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. Then I see Zomd66 says, when do you know when you're giving too much detail, too much description? Absolutely. I've just released, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, how to avoid being a boring GM, how to avoid giving too much description, too much detailing. Especially if you're an author GM, if you're one of those who likes to really, really paint out and flesh out the world, I think a good gauge, if you're not sure, is when players start to stop writing notes, or they start to drift off, or if you describe stuff and at the end of it they go, sorry, what? That's a good indicator. But generally speaking, I go for 3 things and that's it. So the castle that is in the mountains, we would describe, say, the size of it, we would describe the hidden nature of it, and we would describe the color of it. And that's it. This massive castle with multiple towers and an outer bailey, and then this large, domineering central keep imposes itself out of the mountains, completely obscured by one of the large boulders as you come around the hidden path, reveals itself before you. Then once the players start to ask, well, what does it look like it's heavily defended? You can see on the battlements ballista, but no one is present arming them. Or they're all heavily present, but the ballista seem to be armed not with bolts, but with nets. So you're adding in detail, you're sort of feeding detail as they ask for it. So that's something that I do there. Someone on the internet says, what do you think of retconning? I hate retconning. I really do. And I would rather, if it's a player who goes, oh, no, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else, especially once they've learnt the outcome. Once the dice is rolled, as far as I'm concerned, once the dice is rolled, it is done. So it is rolled, so it has happened, and it can't be taken back. Once your turn has moved on, once we have said, I leap into the maw of the tentacle creature. Okay, that's what you're doing. It takes an acrobatics check or an athletics check or whatever it is that you're using. You leap into the maw of the monster. And, right, so that's what you're doing. All right, next up is Brian. What's your character doing? Brian says, oh, well, my character's actually... And then this player says, oh, actually, I don't want to jump into the mouth. Too late, your initiative order has been moved on. If it is you as the GM who wants to retcon something, that's a different story. I don't believe you should retcon. I think what you should do is, if the person leaps into the maw of the beast and you say, it opens up this cavernous mouth, and you suddenly realize that the person is going to get eaten and you really don't want that to happen. Retconning, and it's a bit of an odd example, but you could retcon yourself if you realize that that's too dangerous. That as the player lands on the creature explodes in a puff of dust. It was actually a plant illusion. And there's a smaller plant there with a smaller mouth that's going to start mauling on the player character. You know where your plan was. You know where your adventure was supposed to be going. Only you know the statistics of the monster. So you can change things as you go along. Just remember to be consistent once you have done that. Mike Hilburn asks, how would I ask you a question that is too long for chat? Okay, well, Mike, the best thing that I can do, or suggest anyway, is join us on Discord. Our Discord channel is crazy. There's so many people in there. I'm just checking now the link to see if it is down below. I know that some of my Discord goblins are in this chat now. If you are a Discord goblin, and you can do it, because that's why the web goblin was supposed to be here, just drop the link into the chat, please. Mike, you can join us there. You can ask that question. And there are so many people. There are literally 1,000 more people there than there are currently on the stream. Who will happily answer your questions, and I'm there as well frequently in the mornings and in the evenings, trying to answer as best as I can. Okay, so let's carry on down. We've got another 18 minutes or so plenty of time. James Dragonhammer says, what's the difference for playing as a hobo killer and playing as a serial killer character? Well, generally speaking, in my experience, a hobo killer or a murder hobo, I think, is what you're talking about here. Those are players who generally they just attack and kill everything. They don't necessarily ask questions. They don't engage too much. They would arrive at the castle. They would see that Kusindru is saying, "Oh, my father is evil. Come and look, I'll show you the torture chamber." They go down into the torture chamber. They kill all of the torturers. They kill all of the prisoners. They go upstairs. They kill the Duke, and the story is over. So that, and I think that's a pretty good example of how murder hobos completely derail your entire narrative. If you have murder hobos in your game, and this is the question that sort of leads on from that, I think, anyway. If you have murder hobos in that game, that castle now suddenly becomes populated with guards from everywhere, and the entire thing becomes a slogfest where they're fighting through all of these deranged guards, which now have become, mindless zombies under the control of the Duke. And once they've killed everyone in the castle and they've freed Kusindru, or killed her, but most likely freed her, that's the end of the adventure. You forget about the tentacle druids, you forget about the swamps, that becomes another murder session later on. A serial killer, in my opinion, is an evil character. I don't think that's actually in my opinion. I think everyone can genuinely say that a serial killer is bad. That was the issue that I had with Dexter, for example, that sort of vigilante TV show way back when. The show made me try and like someone who has the serial killer mentality because they're killing evil people. Yes, we could go down that route if you want to, and that's a whole different episode, I suppose. But a serial killer, generally speaking, is someone who is evil, and that's an evil campaign. So that's a very different type of campaign to play out. And there, I think you would have the party join the Duke to go and hunt down this tentacled beast in exchange for just wadges of cash. We're just going to give you lots of coins, and you are going to go out there and kill this tentacle creature because I'm the Duke and I say so. So I hope that answers your question. Britain H says, how would you create a plane shifting machine? So by plane shifting, if I'm looking here, I'm assuming you mean moving from one plane to the other. Plane shifting machine. Automatically one says, oh, it sounds gnomish. I hate that idea that it's automatically we go, oh, it's a gnomish plane shifting machine. I don't like that idea. The idea of the machine having to actually work, the MacGuffin of the machine. If you watch my Windswift show, which is on the Bacon RPG channel, you can find the links below. That's where I do a real play session, playthrough session with some really great role players. There they have an airship which flies, using this bizarre engine that keeps them afloat. Now, for a long time, I didn't really know what powered that engine. Now, I'm talking a decade ago. I didn't really know what that powered that engine. I just wanted a flying ship, or as in your case, a plane shifting device. I didn't know how it worked. You don't need to know how it works, because unless you have an artificer in your group, they don't need to understand the fundamentals. It just does. We have that wonderful little caveat of it's magic, it's divine. It uses an energy source beyond our universe. So I would do that for a couple sessions anyway in your adventure before you work out how it necessarily works. It allows you to see how attached your players are to the device, and it also allows you to see whether that device has a value, narratively speaking, or not. If it doesn't, you need to get rid of it. So again, look at the idea of the DeLorean from Back to the Future. The DeLorean was the device that allowed them to go back in the past. Now, in almost all of the films, I think, the powering up of the DeLorean or getting the DeLorean to speed was important. Did we ever learn how it worked? No, we didn't. We weren't really involved. We weren't really interested in how it worked. We just knew that we had to get it to work to get back in time and those sort of things. All right, I'm going to look for some questions now that relate more to this stream than to general questions. Don't worry, I will be taking all of these questions and add them to the list so we can make videos and things. Francesco D'Amario says, how can I disguise properly the nemesis without denying to the players the chance to discover him earlier than predicted by me? Oh, that's an interesting question. So nemesis in this term, once the book comes out, you'll see how I term nemesis. But let's say, for example, we talk about the Duke in the castle. How do you disguise the Duke to make the Duke feel as if they're not necessarily evil? Well, of course, if the Duke is an undead skull Dark Lord Lich, that's going to be tricky. there is a workaround for that. But let's take our example here with the Duke of this particular missing castle. Let's take it that he is we never decided on what race they're going to be. Let's say he's a dwarf. And as a dwarf, he is a father who is concerned for his daughter. Now, I generally try and have different classifications of villains because I don't like to confuse the situation too much. I like my bad guys to be bad. I like the good guys to be good, and grey areas become tricky. So if the Duke is this compassionate father who really, my daughter is in love with this creature out in the swamps and I just can't handle it. What does she see in him? I mean, he's just tentacles and slime and slithering. I don't understand it myself, personally. You've got to help me. If you play him as a sympathetic character, the party might actually join his side. So you've got to be very careful. So he could make that speech. And then to make sure that the party doesn't like him too much, a servant comes in and maybe makes a tray with the silver goblets that the party's picked up. That's a good idea. Rattle or shake or something. And he smacks the servant aside and says, "Don't make a noise, you useless cretin! Get back into the kitchens with you and get a flogging for making the noise." So you try and reveal that this is a bad character. If they decide beforehand that he is a bad character and they kill him, what do you then do? Because that was your finale, theoretically speaking. So now they've killed the bad guy, and now there's the swamp. That's absolutely fine. Well, all that you do is you add in another bad guy. Remember, you are the only one who knows this plan. You are the only one who knows this plan. So, he dies. Cassandra is heartbroken. She has lost her father, but she now can go out into the swamp. So she now rushes out into the swamp to Mercule, her lover. Where is my lover? He's been abducted by another bad guy. Remember, you've got an adventure to run here. So she gets into the swamp and she discovers, lo and behold, the father had actually hired mercenaries before the party arrived. And those mercenaries have succeeded in taking her lover prisoner. You still have your encounters, you still have your journey, you still have your big combat with the mercenaries now at the end of the the adventure, even though the father has been killed. So yes, it is tricky if your players figure out your nemesis beforehand. But generally speaking, I like to make sure that they know who the nemesis happens to be. Ian McEchen here, it's not McEwen. New GMs would get a lot out of starting with Lost Mine of Fandelveer. I'm currently playing Lost Mine of Fandelveer on my YouTube channel, and it guides new GMs on how to GM. Absolutely. So you can go and have a look there at Ian's channel and running through Mines of Fandelveer. The challenge I have with Mines of Fandelveer is it can be quite tough if the GM has experience. They can make it really, really difficult for the players. If the players are really inexperienced, they can die. I've actually had characters die in that very first goblin encounter, and if not in the first goblin encounter, in that goblin cave, which pops up later on. Anyway, not to be distracted. Okay, we've got 9 minutes left. I've still got some more questions here. Someone on the internet, again, asks the question, how much time do you think you should spend on world building as a GM? That's a very, very good question to ask. World building is a completely different story. I am going to advocate that you go to worldanvil.com and have a look at what they're doing. They aggregate all your notes. They prompt you to write stuff about your world building, and then you could spend a lifetime there creating your worlds and things, and I think that would be quite a fun exercise. A lot of people do. It depends. Now, if you have an interest in how far you should go, I have been running a series of special event videos where I take you quite literally from the very moment I come up with an idea for a campaign for the save or dice game. So I literally start with coming up with the plot, coming up with the master plot, and then actually designing the world and the entire world setting. It's all in that series of videos. I think it runs for about 6 hours or so, give or take, because that's even drawing the maps for the world setting that's going to happen. So you can have a look at that. And that's where you'll see how much time I put into it. So if you look at something like Braxia, for example, which is a world setting, I'm pointing, there's a map on the wall over there. I'm pointing to that map. That has taken 15 years of being played in to get to a certain space. So I don't advocate you take 15 years. It certainly didn't start off that way. It started off, oh, here's some continents, here's a bit and that and the next thing, and bing, off we go. So I would say that you need to spend a couple hours on world building, no more. Flesh it out as you go along. Remember, it's all in your head, so the players can discover stuff and learn stuff as they go along. So don't put yourself under pressure to have to do all of that before you start. I think that's often a mistake that a lot of young GMs make, a lot of novice GMs make, and more experienced GMs as well, is they want to get this perfect Tolkien-esque world down with all the languages and the written symbols and all of that sort of thing going on. The players won't know that. They won't discover that in the first session. And even if your session runs for 6 hours, they're probably going to be stuck in a dungeon somewhere where they really are not likely to experience too much of your world. So I would always just design the world just enough that you can answer most questions easily and that the players can get given information without too much hassle before moving on to the next dungeon. Then you've got week in between each week to plan and prep and design. Okay, question here. Alex Vra asks, how do you avoid making railroad campaigns? It's a complex question, Alex. And if you watch the Save or Dice game that I'm running, it's definitely Railroad. It's definitely Railroad, but there's a reason for that. I was told you are going to run 12 episodes. Those 12 episodes need to tell a story. There needs to be a good conclusion. So it really needs to feel more like a TV show, which is a Railroad. In a television show, the characters don't have free will. They go and they do exactly what needs to happen in order for the show to tell its story. So that's how I'm designing that one. They're free to go in any direction they like. I will just change the direction or the object that they are going towards. I'll just move that around. On the other hand, if you have a look at the Windswift is a fairly complex game because we have a crew of an airship who have discovered that the order that they work for, this gigantic order, which used to give them commands, go here, save this, do that. So that was fairly railroady. The crew discovered that there's corruption in the ranks. Now, I had no plan for what the players or their characters were going to do on that. They've now decided to launch a guerrilla war, basically, against this order. Now, there is no way, I think, that one can accommodate for that kind of thing if you are running a railroad campaign. At the same time, I could quite easily crush that order. There are telepaths all over the place. The order is designed to find people leading rebellions against the order. So it would be very simple for me as a GM to railroad that conclusion on that subject. But the players have wanted to do that. So I've had to step back and go, right, I need to now prepare for a guerrilla-style campaign where these 5 people are taking on the most powerful organization on the planet. How am I going to get them to succeed whilst at the same time making it feel as if they aren't going to succeed? So railroading, I think, is really where you as the GM step back and go, we're going to go in all sorts of directions. I'm going to have salient points. So if you look, and I really wish this thing was out now. In my book, I talk about how you come up with a campaign, but how you leave it open-ended so that you have a plan, you have a plot, but the characters can go wherever they like. They can go off in different directions and your plot continues to tick over. It doesn't get derailed when they go in the opposite direction or when they do the opposite thing. It changes and it evolves. So avoid railroading by not having a fixed plan that you stick to. Adapt and evolve and change your plan, and that's how you will avoid that. Okay, so let's see. There's lots of conversation going on here. Cassandra Judd, not Kusindru, says here, how would you handle a single-player campaign? Well, it's interesting that you asked that question. I'm currently running, or at least I was running a single-player campaign. A friend of mine now reached out. Excuse me, that's terrible. I'm so sorry for that. A friend of mine, like I said, he's a friend now, he reached out to me at the beginning of the year and said, hey, can I throw money your way and you run a private game for me, a one-on-one game? So I said, all right, fine, let's do that. Absolutely. Let's run a one-on-one game and let's see where this goes, because I haven't run a one-on-one game in quite some time. Now, what was interesting was the player purposefully made sure that his character wasn't particularly strong, wasn't particularly powerful. He wasn't min-maxing. We're using the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition system. And basically was just not fantastic at what he was, at what his character was supposed to do. But he decided that his character was a little bit of a con man, a little bit of a wheeler and a dealer.
So I set him up in a city, and it became very apparent that on his own he needed help. So he started to meet street urchins and lowlifes that he as a player decided he was going to throw some coin at. Now, the one character I decided was a homeless kid who's a thief. He's got some thieving abilities because the adventures were sort of leaning towards locked doors and skulking around in warehouses and things. So this young thief gets offered 5 gold pieces by the principal player, and so gets added on. So now I think his bevy of people, as he's been playing now for almost a year, I think he's now got 8 people. He has 50% shares in a brothel, which doubles up as a cover for his activities that are happening elsewhere. He's got barmen. He's picking up prostitutes from other brothels that are downtrodden. They give him a quest. He goes on the quest. He comes back and then he hires them. So what I've done is I've allowed his NPC stable to expand significantly. Now he role plays. He doesn't really role play. He has stats for all of those NPCs on his side of the screen, and I role play all of the NPCs. So they do, he sort of turns to them, he has conversations with them. So I'm role playing all of the NPCs, he has all of their stats. I have their backgrounds, I have their histories. Like I said, he just has their stats. So you can absolutely run a one-on-one game, and it's a very different game. I mean, in this game, he is plotting, he's conniving, he's doing all sorts of wonderful things. His wife has now joined him, or his wife-to-be anyway, has now joined him in that. So now it's a 2-player game, but it's still very complicated, very personal. The stories can be much more involved because it's a single-player campaign. It's a lot of fun. It's very, very different. I would recommend it. There is actually a video way back when on how to run a one-on-one game, because I do enjoy them from time to time. Very different from a dynamic group dynamic. All right, so we're running out of time here. Wow, the player of V with the nice orange highlights. I don't know how to do that. I'm a bit of a technophile, I'm afraid. That's why, again, the Web Goblin was supposed to be here. Sorry, Web Goblin, there's lots of cake coming your way. Says, do you paint your own minis? Yes, I do. It doesn't really have much to do with this particular video. I do paint my own minis. I got into minis by actually wanting to paint minis for use in Dungeons and Dragons and as sort of tabletop minis and as a bit of a hobby. I'm not very good at it, and I have my own style. I don't do the traditional sort of Warhammer painting style. I actually don't have any on hand, and this castle... I don't have autofocus on. There's little rose got. Oh, the green is green screening out, so that's why the castle looks like it has holes. Anyway, there we go. Right. So yes. So there we go. Any other questions? I think I have some experience. How to be a great GM. Don't forget, you can chat with us. There we go. Fantastic. Someone popped up the Discord link. Thank you very much for that. And then last question again. Someone on the internet. Well, someone on the internet's been asking a lot of questions. So as I wrap up, the question is, what's your ideal session length? For me, the ideal session length is probably somewhere between 3 to 4 hours. I like that duration simply because that kind of feels like a film to the players who've been playing in it, with all of their banter and the delay of combat and that sort of thing. 3 to 4 hours I think sits quite well. I've ran a campaign for many years where we would play on a Friday night, and it would start at sort of 7 and finish at 11 in the evening, so that's about 4 hours, give or take. Of course, that's not a hard and fast rule. I have had some wonderful games. We were talking about the Mines of Fendelvia. That was run for me by a wonderful GM from the GM's Vault, Mike Harris, and that was a 9-hour game. And that was literally just the opening and the caves of the Mines of Fendelvia. So we were having so much fun. So ideally 4 hours or so, give or take. I see there's lots of things going on there. Jason Kamara, I see there's a question. How do you do a recurring villain that still rewards the players despite never being caught? Lots of great questions. I think we can say that. Oh, Eric, there's Eric. Hello, Eric. Eric was one of the ones who played in that long game with me in St. Paul when I was out there. Anyway, thank you, all 247 of you that tuned in to watch this. Thank you for joining me here. I'm not going to apologize again for completely sleeping through the time that I should have been there. I'm blaming the lack of coffee. This silver tankard is not going to lead me anywhere except to the kettle, so I can make some more after this stream. Thank you so much for all of your questions, your donations. Just blew me away. The just everybody who brought through stuff. Shield Wolf, Kaishman, Yarox, Nova, Brothger, Legion, Jason, Camera. What is happening? My voice is going. R. Highland, Kyle Graham. It's really touching that there is such support for this channel. I absolutely love engaging with you. And I love doing these live shows. They're far more engaging and interesting, I think. And yes, Guy is my real name. My parents had a horrid sense of humor. I really enjoy doing these shows. So until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest. If this is going to be your first session, the very happiest of first games. And if it is not your first session and you've been running campaigns forever, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming. Until next week, when there's another show, goodbye.